Hey guys, Chris here, and I'm a Ukrainian Canadian. Today is June 4th, 2024, and let's get to the news happening in Ukraine, shall we? I will start today with an article from the Telegraph indicating that NATO is preparing itself for potential Russian attack on multiple fronts in Europe. And you can see that here's some corridors that they have planned where they will be rushing US troops and NATO troops in the case of a major European ground war with Russia. You can see that Russia has multiple ways they can attack Europe: through Finland, through the Baltic states, by using Belarus as a trampoline, and also their Kaliningrad Oblast, which is kind of this enclave outside of Russia, which they can also use to destabilize and perhaps cut off the Suwalki Gap, which connects the Baltics with Poland and the rest of Europe. Also, of course, they can always attack Moldova, which if Ukraine would have fell, I think Moldova would have been next. It would have been the easiest target for Russia to capture. So there's different avenues that Russia can use to attack Europe. And even though I know many of you will be saying, look at Russia, they can't even take some fields in Ukraine. How can we expect them to be successful against a massive European war if they were to launch it? I think that we should not underestimate the Russians. And yes, Russia lacks clearly advanced weaponry and technology. They certainly lost thousands of armored vehicles, but something that they don't lack of is men. And they have plenty of that. And as we've seen in the last 2.5 years almost, in the Russian-Ukrainian war, is that the Russians are completely fine with having catastrophic losses. At this point, they've lost over 500,000 men, whether it be wounded, missing in action, dead, over 500,000. And they're not going to stop. And I'm convinced at this point that there's no number that's going to stop Russia unless they're decisively destroyed by the Ukraine military in Ukraine. So do not underestimate them. And this is a very possible scenario in the nearby future. Let's not forget as well that China has its ambitions with Taiwan. Just this week, Xi Jinping mentioned that China will have to take Taiwan by force. And I really hope I'm wrong here, but it seems to be that Russia's made up its mind, or China made up its mind, that they will have to attack Taiwan, which will have a major destabilizing effect, because now it's going to be two wars that we're going to be concentrating on, one in Ukraine, one in Taiwan. And potentially, we know that in Israel, there's this ring of fire, the proxies being established by Iran with Hezbollah. You have Hamas and other terrorist organizations being sponsored by Iran. You have North Korea as well, and South Korea. So there's a lot of conflicts that can start brewing up. And we cannot underestimate that this could be also a good moment for Russia to attack in Europe and destabilize NATO, because there's going to be too many fires to put out. So thankfully, from what I'm seeing here, is that NATO is aware of these potential scenarios occurring, and they're preparing for that. So you guys can let me know what you think about this. Next, there's some good news coming out from Washington, and now this is just some rumors, but it seems like the US is indicating and having talks with Ukraine on permitting the Ukrainians to strike deeper within Russia by using ATACMS. We know that now, since the green light has been given to Ukraine in the last week to strike Russian territory, we have more details that the Ukrainians so far can only use HIMARS missiles, that is, the missiles that have about a range of 85 kilometers maximum. So still pretty efficient, pretty long distance, but not as far as the Ukrainians would like. And the furthest the Ukrainians can strike is usually just a little bit outside of Belgorod city, because most of the strikes are now ongoing in Belgorod, because this is where the Russians are launching a lot of offensives and attacks towards Kharkiv Oblast and also Luhansk. So the Ukrainians are really concentrating their fire around there with HIMARS missiles. And if you guys have watched my previous video, you might remember the picture I shared with you with the over 300 HIMARS missiles that the Ukrainians utilized just in the last week alone. So massive quantity, but the Ukrainians need more destructive, more powerful, longer range missiles, and the ATACMS is perfect for that. The ballistics have shown themselves to be very efficient and deadly against the Russian military. So of course, if the US is going to permit Ukraine to use the ballistics, it will have certain limitations imposed on them. And I have no doubt about it. The Biden administration loves this escalation policy, and this is the type of management that they do. But most likely that they will impose a kind of 100-kilometer maximum range within Russia. Absolutely, they will not permit the Ukrainians to use them in large cities like Moscow or whatever, even though it's, to be honest, it's outside of the range, because the ATACMS have a range of about 300 kilometers maximum, depending on the variant. But once that is permitted, which I believe is just a matter of time, this will have much bigger devastating effects on Russian logistics, specifically in Belgorod, which is right around here, Rostov, Bryansk, Voronezh Oblast, which are bordering the border with Ukraine. So you guys can let me know if what you think. If you think that the United States will permit Ukraine in the next few weeks, I really hope so. And to be honest, I think it's just a matter of time. I'm very convinced that the United States understands that what Russia has been displaying in the last few years with their nuclear threats is just bluff. And Ukraine has really debunked it. It's, they've struck so many refineries, they've struck so many important, untouchable Russian radar sites, the nuclear deterrence sites. And what happened, right? Russia did not answer back with nuclear weapons. And even in the last week, with all these strikes on Russian territory with American weapons, nothing happened. So this is proof that Russia is simply bluffing, and they're actually just doing nuclear saber rattling because they understand that this is kind of the only card they have to really deter the West from really getting involved at 100% and helping Ukraine and being committed to Ukraine's victory. Last but not least, this is kind of an unfortunate picture, but this I think is important to share with you guys. This is a Ukrainian prisoner of war which came back home. And does this remind you of something? You guys can write in the comment section what this picture reminds you of. This reminds me of the Holocaust and the terrible pictures we saw of these camps that were created by Nazi Germany against the Jewish population and other minorities. And this is the exact same thing that Russia is doing against Ukrainian people. And the Russian human crimes just have no limits, right? They will continue with their barbaric methods until they're defeated. And the Russian mission will not stop. It's very simple for them. They absolutely want to annihilate every Ukrainian people and their culture. They hate everything that is Ukrainian. Just watch the stories if you haven't read them. Anything that even remotely reminds the Russians of Ukraine will be, playing Ukrainian music, having something that looks like the Ukrainian flag. They'll throw these people under the bus, throw them in jail, right? And I've seen all these stories of, neighbors in Russia ratting their neighbors out because whether, it could have been that the neighbor listened to Ukrainian music, or their kid went to school with, a jacket that looked kind of pro-Ukrainian, or that had Ukraine colors because it had blue and yellow. So this is just, the Ukrainophobia that the Russians have. They absolutely hate the Ukrainians. And this is a reminder of why the Ukrainians are fighting, because they know that this is an existential question for Ukraine. If they lose, there's no doubt that the Russians will commit even bigger human crimes against the Ukrainian people. So this is why Ukraine will continue to fight no matter what occurs, because there is a peace agreement that the Russians will somehow become benevolent and will be once again bratya, as they say, one nation together. It's really not going to be the case. So just food for thought for you guys. Now, before I end the video, I just wanted to share some updates on the map. So let's talk about it. Again, a lot of strikes going on right now in Belgorod, deep within the Russian rear. And just today, there's been another confirmation that around the area of Severny, so that is right behind Belgorod city, a complex of S-400, S-300 air defense systems were destroyed with Ukrainian HIMARS missiles. So that is very good, permitting most likely Ukrainian long-range drones to fly and operate to strike oil refineries and other military bases within Russia. So excellent news. Again, the Kharkiv offensive hasn't really been moving for the Russians. You can see that there is no real updates. One little rumor, and I saw a video yesterday, allegedly the Ukrainians are claiming that they've captured over 60 Russian prisoners, Russian soldiers that they've captured in Vovchansk. So that remains to be confirmed. There's a video that showcases one Russian soldier with his hands in the air, but I didn't see any 60. So it's still rumor, but you can see that the Russians have been, their offensive, especially in Vovchansk, has really culminated. I'm not seeing them being able to push further than what they currently have. Apart from that, of course, everything that is in Chasiv Yar and Avdiivka, it's very fierce battles. One little update around Avdiivka is that the Russians have pushed just a little bit towards the village of Novo-Alexandrivka. So north of Ocheretine, they've captured some fields in a small block south of this village. And the other update is just in the Robotine axis. And you can see that here the Russians have moved a little bit closer towards Robotine. Again, this is a village of, from what I remember, like less than 1,000 people at best. It's completely razed from the earth. It doesn't exist anymore. There's barely nothing to defend in Robotine, right? And the very fact that the Ukrainians are able to hold on here despite the Russian pressure is really telling. But you can see that the Russians have moved a little bit closer in this kind of forested area south of the village. The Ukrainians still control about 50% of the village. It's a gray zone for now, but it is gray because of a reason. It's really not a settlement anymore. There's very little to defend there. So that's the situation in Zaporizhia. So here you go, guys, a very quick update. Let me know what you guys think about any of the topics I covered today. A huge thank you for your support, not only for this channel, but for the Ukraine cause. And I will see you guys in the next one. Slava Ukraini!